But let's start here. As of yesterday, after a little more than a month of grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, 26 million people are now unemployed. Roughly 10 million people no longer have health care as their insurance was tethered to their jobs. The unemployment rate is expected to hit 25% by the summer as the number of job losses continue to spike. In LA, nearly half or more than half of the people who live there are now unemployed. In Michigan, 22% of the workforce is unemployed. Two-thirds of the Hispanic community has either lost their jobs or wages in response to the pandemic. And 43% of the nation as a whole is in the exact same situation. The bills and expenses have not gone anywhere, just the capacity for people to pay those bills and expenses. And the best that the government has been able to do was basically give pennies thrown at the population while giving trillions to the top 1% in various companies. Compound this economic misery with a health emergency in the various communities of color as they've been taking disproportionate numbers of casualties, working in many of the frontline jobs and being uniquely susceptible to complications of the virus due to ancillary health issues. The president has been doing daily press briefings to give the impression that he's on top of this crisis, but in recent polling, the public has very little trust in what Donald Trump is saying, despite the fact that he's out there pretty much every day. The public is putting more trust in the health professionals and people like Dr. Fauci, but basically they're looking at Trump and thinking he is not being honest and is unclear or unsure in the way that he's going about handling this particular virus. Not to mention the more people and the more economic pain that's distributed all across the country, not to mention the health issues, Trump's approval rating starts to take a hit because the public realizes that his incompetence and malfeasance was directly responsible for the number of people that are getting ill. Despite this being true, at these press briefings, Donald Trump has been saying some pretty unhinged stuff, including giving out poor medical advice. In one case, he was telling people to take medication that has found no propensity to do anything for treating the virus and has literally gotten people killed. Donald Trump has been telling people that heat somehow helps with the virus. He has also went as far to tell people yesterday that disinfectant can kill the virus like that. Now, despite Donald Trump saying this unhinged stuff at these press conferences, listen to his surrogate make this very specific case bolstering and backing up Donald Trump handling of this particular issue.
He's been so attentive to the scientific literature and the details and the data. And I think his ability to analyze and integrate data that comes out of his long history in business has really been a real benefit during these discussions about medical issues. Because in the end, data is data, and he understands the importance of the granularity. And I think he's been really excited about finding the level of detail that we've been able to now bring over the last few weeks to really understand who's at the greatest risk for severe illness, who will have mild and less and asymptomatic disease, and really calling on every American to do that social distancing, because some people may not know they're actually infected and be unknowingly spreading the virus. And that all comes from the president seeing the data and then really directing these policies.
The great part about this is this woman is basically saying, the guy who basically said you can inject yourself with disinfectant, that you can take all of these pills that don't necessarily do anything, that you can stand out in the heat and somehow that will be an inhibitive factor in regards to the virus. That guy is a numbers guy and a details guy, and that guy has been just diving himself into dealing with the science of this. That's nonsense. That's utter and entire nonsense. This is the same guy who's been agitating to open up the community, the society. This is the same guy who's been working behind the scenes to open up the various communities against the advice of health professionals, making people miserable, making people vulnerable, to get those people out there to agitate, to kick it all open, in spite of it being against their health interests. Yesterday, the Democratic Party comes out and approves a stimulus package in order to give more money to basically a small business program. Now, you would think that the Democratic Party could create a contrast against the measly items that the Republican Party has been putting forth, but not so much. The Democratic Party has not been able to create any level of real contrast, and for the most part has just been piggybacking on what Donald Trump has been doing, not even really making a strong stance in regards to making sure the public remains whole, making sure that the medical expenses aren't there, making sure that rents and some of these other bills are postponed. They're not doing any of that. And this is the party that should be knocking this out of the park with this particular opportunity to get their priorities accomplished. Not so much. Despite all the economic havoc that I mentioned to you early on, the Democratic Party accepted a bill that put out $480 billion without giving any of that money to states, to workers, for food stamps, to ensure that people, again, are made whole, to make sure that those bills are pushed past where they are not necessarily destroyed by these things. That's not what they're doing at all. Instead, they have just been piggybacking on whatever the Republican Party has been doing. And in doing so, have basically created a wash between the way the public perceives Trump and the way public perceives Biden in regards to the way they can handle the virus. That is disastrous. The Democratic Party has basically found a losing strategy. So Politico is reporting that basically the numbers are likely to continue to rise, meaning job losses, and that the Democratic Party's plan is basically to use those job losses to attack Donald Trump. Understand what this means. That the party has an incentive to not do anything, to create as much pain and misery as possible and let Donald Trump go along with this path of agitating to open up the economy. So they can sit back while the economy is closed and point and say, ha ha, look at the economy taking a hit. It didn't have to take this hit. It wouldn't have been as bad if you would have had somebody else in the office as opposed to Donald Trump. Now, I hate to tell them this is not going to work. Even now, with the economy hitting the skids, the public considers Donald Trump to be better on this issue than Democrats. I want you to hear AOC trashing this House bill and the reason why AOC is trashing this House bill. Let's play the clip.
On behalf of my constituents in the Bronx and Queens, New York's 14th congressional district, the most impacted district in America, calling people losing their families every day. It is a joke when Republicans say that they have urgency around this bill. The only folks that they have urgency around are folks like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack. Those are the people getting assistance in this bill. You are not trying to fix this bill for mom and pops. And we have to fight to fund hospitals, fighting to fund testing. That is what we're fighting for in this bill. It is unconscionable. If you had urgency, you would legislate like rent was due on May 1st and make sure that we include rent and mortgage relief for our constituents. Thank you very much.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the
constituency
chair.
is being uniquely affected by this. She's in New York. That constituency deals with people of color, and you have people who, for the most part, at the low end of the economic scale that is taking the brunt of this and are being made vulnerable. Her point is, why are we dealing with this incremental bill when this incremental bill doesn't deal with the real material concerns of the population, especially my population? And she's aghast and shocked by this. What I think she misses, though, is that the reason that the Democratic Party is doing this, the reason that they're being so feckless and weak on this very specific point is because they're going to use it as an attack point to hit Trump later on in regards to Trump having closed the economy, despite the fact that the Democratic Party is on board for them keeping the economy closed. This is utterly astonishing. And I hate to tell you, this is going to lose. The public does not blame Trump for the economy being shut. They may blame him for incompetence. They may blame him for getting a lot of people killed. They may blame him for the infection rate being high, but they don't consider him at fault for the economy. And by not creating a contrast with Trump on these various hosts of issues, you end up creating a situation where you are picking a uniquely weak argument to make against Trump. Bob, it sounds like of all the arguments that the Democratic Party can make, they've chosen a uniquely weak one as opposed to actually dealing with the issues of policy and dealing with the material concerns of the population and bringing people over to their side through that.